and they worked, a lot of them, in that manner. And it produced the Bruce Naumans and, you know, the Rebecca Horns and whatever. And in music it happens the same way. However much critics write, the other musicians decide who they're going to be influenced by, and the history and the story of the music will come through the artists all the time.
Absolutely. It's like a note passed from one person to the next. I mean, you can't lie to young people that have no, like, cliques of power that they need to support. Either they're going to find your work useful, and they're going to take it somewhere and do something with it, or it will be meaningless to them. It doesn't matter how many fancy friends you have, or how many people are buddies of this one, or whatever.
Who has influenced you the most, Julian? Other than Mary Boone.
I'm influenced by everything.
Oh, of course you are. But I mean, whose
art do I love?
Yeah.
Whose art do I love? Well, that's a
Picabia.
I love Picasso's paintings, and
you love the portraiture.
I love many of his paintings.
Yeah.
I like the late paintings very, very much.
Now, you didn't ever say, did you? Did you say and mean?
Go on.
The famous comparison between you and Picasso?
What is it? What was
well, somewhere I read that you had said that you were going to rank, or you associated yourself with Picasso.
No, that was
me.
I think that, you know, people have said that I've said all sorts of stuff that, I mean, listen, I'm guilty of, and I will admit to being guilty for most things, but I'd like to be at least guilty for my own crimes.
Yeah.
For example, in this article, somebody said, "How do you feel about this man?" I don't remember his name. You know, feel about your what do you think your place is?
Right.
And I said, well, "Why don't you tell me what you think? Why do I have to say what I think?" So, at another point, I said, "Well, I wouldn't trade places with anybody. I mean, would you like to be somebody else? Do you want to trade places with somebody? I mean, would you, Charlie? Would you like to be somebody else?"
No.
Is there is there some hubris connected with that? Like that you're happy to be yourself?
Exactly.
Or would you rather be Tom Snyder?
Well, no.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't mean
I don't like Tom Snyder.
Right. Exactly. You know, and it's just it's like, you know, people would like me to be able to do all this stuff, have one arm tied behind my back, and not touch the floor while I'm doing it, and sort of disappear while it's getting made.
Yeah. But are we going to see, this is the point you were making about Europe, where you're seeing these walls break down between music, you know. We're seeing, I mean, you're not the first painter to want to make films.
I don't want to stop painting either.
Yeah.
But, you know, another thing that happened in the 80s that was a great thing is that a lot of the boundaries broke down between all of these different countries. There were these exhibitions like Metropolis, Zeitgeist,
but
and there was not just an American art.
I agree with you there, but I think the real telling time was when the wall came down, just in 1990 there. A major change swept through Europe. And there was a new feeling. It was a friendly, gleeful kind of iconoclasm that happened.
Yeah. But it's
sweeping away.
It started earlier than that.
It started earlier, and that started with people in Europe, with people like Gilbert and George and that crowd. But I mean, it going from one medium to the other.
But I'm just talking about like Francesco Clemente and all of the Italian artists, and there were German artists, and before there was a great American chauvinism, and like we have in the museum.
But that's not quite true. I mean, how can you say that? I mean, I don't. There is.
We're going to get into this argument.
I hope so.
There is no country which has an indigenous population that created its art form. I mean, most of British art, our best British art, comes from Europe. Hans Holbein, Van Dyck, to start with, and going a history through there, even to right now people like Lucian Freud and Kossoff, Frank Auerbach from that school. And there's now the Czechoslovakians, the Chapman brothers.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that in America, I mean, you say that Clementi and these guys came over in the 80s, but there had already been Duchamp, there had already been...
No, but what I'm... let me be more specific. What I'm talking about is when you have a museum like the Whitney Museum of American Art, and you have an exhibition, a biennale, and you're not going to have Italian painters, and you're not going to have German painters, and that's what I'm talking about, in 1980 or whatever, 1990, and you're not going to have English painters because they're not from the United States. There's a form of chauvinism. And what I'm saying is that these people, and of course, I mean, Bill de Kooning came from Holland, and Europeans have always come over here and got rid of their baggage and been great Americans.
But I'm talking about the even further breaking down. They're even the splintering of the parameters between the art forms themselves, which is...
Sure, well, that's a whole other...
Yeah, but that's very much the feeling at the moment. That is the zeitgeist at the time.
But what we're talking about, if we're talking about also the 80s, or when this thing was going on, I mean, I think that Jean-Michel, in his early 20s, achieved a place in the international art world where there was definitely a voice.
Certainly did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that place?
Well, he was like a cipher in a way. He would take everything from the Bible, auto mechanics catalogs, obscure Byzantine neighborhoods,
Afrocentric and Western.
Yes, and I'm going to steal one of your cigarettes.
Sure, go ahead. And we got 3 more minutes here. Go ahead.
Right. And he'd put them through his grist in some way, and he would come out with this poetic revision of the world.
Yeah, he was very popular in Europe, and Warhol was more popular in Europe than he was in America during his own lifetime.
Is that right?
Oh,
That's absolutely true.
Absolutely right.
He was more popular.
He was regarded very suspiciously in America, Warhol, generally. But Europe ate him up. I mean, we really...
See, now I have a great idea for you, Julian.
Yeah.
Why don't you make a film about Andy Warhol's life with David starring as your next film?
Oh, he already did that, and I already sort of did that. But, but I'll tell you, one night...
He already did what? He already did David.
He already did that, but, one night I was standing in front of McDonald's on University Place, and Jean-Michel and Andy were working together. And they didn't usually work in that part of the studio. But I was just standing there in the dark, looking up at the studio on 17th Street, and I saw Jean walk towards the wall, and Andy, we have to roll.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And they were, and I just saw them, and it was silent, and you just saw these two people, and, I mean, they could not look more dissimilar, but they were somehow twins.
Yeah.
And they were doing this thing, and I thought, God, I'd like to kind of tell the story of this relationship, because I think Andy is one of the most misunderstood people since Hitler. I mean...
Hitler was misunderstood?
Well, maybe he wasn't. Maybe I'm...
But Andy was how? In what way?
Hitler
into
I don't
either. But how was Andy misunderstood?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that think that Hitler was a good guy. I mean, I would say they misunderstood him.
Yeah, they're...
As misunderstood as Julian Schnabel.
All right, no, let's stay with Andy, though. How was Andy misunderstood?
He was seen as a vampire. He was seen as somebody that took advantage of other people. And then even in his diaries, it seemed like he was bitchy or whatever. But when we're alone with people that we know real well, we'll say whatever comes to our minds. But the fact is, he was very generous. He was he was a great painter. I don't even know that I think he believed that Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg and Roy Lichtenstein were great painters.
Yeah.
I don't think he even believed in his own... He was very insecure about what he was doing, but I think he was one of the real great painters of the 20th century. I mean, he's very important to me, and I think Jean-Michel felt that way also. And when Lou Reed said to me, that you really showed him the way he was, and that made me feel like finally this person was represented in a way that was accurate, that meant more to me than any criticism that I could receive for the film or any good review or whatever. It was something that I wanted to make a requiem for Andy. When Jean-Michel was sitting there looking at that television set, which you'll see in the film whenever you see it, I blended images that Jonas Mekas had taken of Andy with David, and there was this... We watched both of them, and his death was the death in the film rather than Jean's, because Jean kind of kept going in a sense, and Andy died for them in terms of the drama of the film. And it was a love note to them in a sense. I made a requiem for them. That's basically what my job was. And when you ask me about making another movie or whatever, I would have to care as much about the subject matter, and I don't want to be employed. I would like to do something in a way where it's uncompromised, and I think that I had final cut over this film, and there are no compromises in this film. But I was only able to do it with people like David and Chris and Dennis and Gary and Jeffrey Wright, and people who really gave me their soul and their heart and their energy. And without this kind of cooperation, this was sort of an impossible task. There was
Chris Walken is outstanding in this movie. He's great.
He's absolutely
he just
brilliant.
eats it up. There's one scene that I die. I mean, he's just so wonderful. He's so
He
great.
is. And Chris Walken wrote a beautiful play that was called Him. I saw it twice.
Is that
it only,
a Presley thing?
Yeah, and I told my daughters that they had to come see it with me because it was like watching Marlon Brando perform open heart surgery on himself. And he said, if you can't surprise yourself, how do you expect to surprise anyone else? And I think that whatever I do, I don't do it to illustrate what I know. I do it to find out something that I don't know.
That's very true. When you work in a creative area, if you're working in a comfortable area, you know nothing much is going to be produced. It's only when you start to move just slightly out of your depth and you feel you're a little bit lost, that's when you're going to get something exciting going. It'll either be a dismal failure or it'll be spectacularly what you really want to do.
And, Bill Gaddis wrote in the Recognitions in 1953, most paintings, the instant you see them, they become familiar, and then it's too late. So people want to be comfortable. They get nervous when they're uncomfortable. But I think if artists are comfortable and they don't come out to know something that they don't know anything about, you never get anything new.
I agree. I agree there.
Well, we agree about a lot of things. It's just this,
Thank you both. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having us here.
Good to have you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you.